Well, good day and welcome once again to the Genius Path. I'm Steve Bonenberger, and what a wonderful life we get to all live. If you're involved in our audience, and thankfully there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people that love what we do, you know that we are involved in really only one thing, and that is broken human beings. We deal with broken people. And the triangle of my life, I tell this to people all the time, is restoration, reconciliation, and reinvention. That is who I am. It's who I've been my whole life. You know, for whatever reason, God has had me in this corner, and I've just stayed here. You know, little did I know that my own life would break a couple of times. And if you know my story, I don't go over it on that often. You can go back and pick it up and watch some of the other episodes and find out some of the details if that's interesting to you. But what's interesting to me is helping people restore their life, helping people reconcile themselves to whatever it is that has been either withdrawn or removed from their life or shattered in their life, And then, of course, reinvention. I believe that always we want to have a full sail, don't we? We want to have that full sail that's full of winds that are gusting and taking us to the next port of call. And I have a wonderful friend that I've gotten to know over the last year or so. His name's Craig Stanland, and I want you to get to know him. And as always, I say to you, support this man. If you are a supporter of our program and lover of what we do, you know, I always ask you to go and buy their book or support their video or their song or their movie or their sculpt or whatever it is. He's got a great book out called Blank Canvas. Blank Canvas. You can find it on Amazon and all the other major outlets. Or go to Craig Stanland, Stanland, Stanland.com, and then find out what this gentleman is about. He's going to talk to you today about whatever's on his mind. And I welcome you, Craig, and I thank and honor you for being on our program, sir.
Steve, thank you so much for what a wonderful introduction. And really, I'm so grateful to have met you just over a year ago and for the friendship that we've developed and for this opportunity. That triangle, I absolutely love that. I love the triangle. It resonates with me. It just strikes that chord within me. And for me, what really stands out is that reinvention piece.
Yeah.
So I actually call myself a reinvention architect. That is what I help people do.
Craig. I didn't know that about you. Go on.
That's my job. I am a coach, and I am specifically a reinvention architect, and I help people reinvent themselves. And what I do, I seem to have two very distinct sets of clients. Some who have completely fallen apart, who have completely hit rock bottom, and they need to reinvent themselves. They don't know what to do. They're lost. And then the other set is actually people who are doing okay, but they're not living the life that they want to live. They know that there is more out there for them, so they need to reinvent themselves as well. And what I find so interesting about this and why I love what I do, I've been on both sides of that equation.
Sure.
I've been, when I was in the corporate world, making a significant amount of money, living what some would call the life. I knew that it wasn't my passion. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to write. I wanted to create. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to get out of that corporate life. But I just didn't have the tools or the courage to know how to do that. And that, I'm a very worst case scenario of what can happen. But that led me to really how I ended up hitting rock bottom of committing fraud against one of the largest technology companies in the world and getting arrested by the FBI, being sentenced to 2 years of federal prison and losing absolutely everything and having to reinvent completely from scratch. There is a court order barring me from my old industry. So I can't even go back into the corporate world the way that I knew it. And what I realized, this was very interesting, was there was a time when I was in prison, and it got really dark when I was in prison. It got really dark for me to the point of planning how I was going to kill myself. And I was very fortunate that a well-timed visit from one of my best friends turned everything around for me. And that's when I started my reinvention process. But there was this time where I was still in prison. It was still very rough. I wasn't planning on how I was going to kill myself anymore, but it was still very rough. And I said, I have nothing. I have nothing. And I just was ruminating that I have nothing. But I kept repeating it. I have nothing. I have nothing. And it was weighing on me. It was pulling me down further and further. And I don't know what exactly turned. Maybe it was my brain actually heard what I was saying and said, I have nothing. I have nothing. I have nothing. I can do whatever I want. I have nothing to lose. And it totally changed my perspective in about a 30-second window, from being crushed by something to being empowered by it and really fueling such a huge part of my reinvention.
His name is Craig Stanland. Craig Stanland, STANLAND.com. He has a book out called Blank Canvas. Go buy it. Spend a few, dive into that pocketbook, pull out some of the raw earth metal you got in there, spend a few bucks on somebody who's taking time to write stuff. He's a dear friend of mine. I love this guy. I love him on all kinds of levels. Why? Because his heart is right. If you come on my show, I'm just telling you, your heart's got to be right. I don't let knuckleheads I got a rule now, Craig. I don't let any knuckleheads back in my life. I've been through enough knuckleheads, okay? You get here, it's because I like you and you got something. So, Craig, I want you to do this for me. Our audience is a very specific group of people. I've told you that. Our audience are people who have hit pylons. Our audience are people that have separated from the ones that they love for some reason. Our audience are people who have been in and out of addictive behaviors and who have been wounded by that. Our audience are people that have been wounded by some of the most atrocious and audacious things that humanity can wield against another. Our audience are people, Craig, that have been, for whatever reason, pushed to the margins by religious people of whatever persuasion. Our audience, Craig, are men and women who do not see themselves as victim, and they are not maudlin. And they seek to find improvement. You have written a book, young man, called Blank Canvas. Give our audience, the folk that are listening, give them some nuggets. Go to the tops of the summit of your mountains and give them some big ideas that they can start to let just bounce into their brain and start to work on their own psyche right now.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for that. What I would go with is what I found to be my first 3 steps when I was in prison that really started put a framework on getting myself out of rock bottom, of that living in the burnt ashes of what was and just stewing in it and living in it. These 3 that I'm about to share with you, they were my first 3 steps out of the burnt ashes of what was. And the first one, I'll tell you just a little story about it, how it came to be. I'm sitting in the prison library and I'm writing in my journal, and I was very much the victim. You mentioned that the audience are not the victims, and that is incredible. What a beautiful place to be. I mean, I know what a beautiful place to be, but I was the victim at this time. So I'm writing, and it was just woe is me on the pages of my journal. I was wishing I didn't make the choices that I made. I was wishing that I was home with my wife and dog and cat. Bear in mind, she had already told me she was leaving me. So that was not even going to happen.
Wow.
I was wishing I wasn't going to be labeled a federally convicted felon for the rest of my life. I was wishing all over the place. And I was living in the past because of all these regrets that I had. And by living in that past, when I started thinking about my future was filled with anxiety because it was being fueled by all these horrible things in the past. So my future was horrible looking to me. It was frightening to me. And it just, by pure intuition, not having attended any 12-step programs, which I think are amazing, but I didn't know what I'm about to tell you is a pillar of that. I just grabbed that pen and paper. Instead of regrets and wishing, I wrote, I accept that I am a federally convicted felon. I accept that I'm getting divorced. I accept that I made the choices that I made. I accept that I'm financially ruined. And I went through about almost a full page of acceptance. And as I was doing it, it hurt. It hurt like hell to do all these things, to admit these truths in my life. But when I was done inside prison, I'll tell you, Steve, I felt freedom for the first time in a very long time by practicing acceptance. That was my very first step, was what I call accepting reality. Reality as it is, not as I wish it would be. What is true for me right now. And that gave me this baseline in which to start over. It wasn't an optimal baseline, but at least I wasn't living in this past that had me paranoid about my future. I had a present moment awareness, and I could start from there. And that was my first step. The second one, I call these my 3 A's. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I started writing the book, I realized that they were the 3 A's. The next one's accepting responsibility. Part of that goes back to that victim role that we were talking about. I was blaming the government, the prosecutors, the FBI for, various things. I was guilty. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, but there were some errors in some of the reports, very minuscule things, very small things that actually wouldn't have impacted my sentence. But it was, how dare they do this? How dare they do that? They made this mistake. I shouldn't be here. And I went and I did the same thing that I did with accepting reality. I accept that I committed a crime, and I just stepped up and I owned it. And I did this while I was in prison as well. And I felt that same bit of freedom. And it was just really spectacular. But then when I accepted that responsibility and took that weight off of me, it then transformed into accepting responsibility for the remainder of my life. Okay, these are the choices that I made. This is what I've done. This is where I am. Now what am I going to do with it? And that led me to the 3A, which was accepting choice. The understanding that every single thing that I do is a choice. There are consequences, but there is a choice. And I have that power to make that choice and to understand that there are consequences. And those were the three initial nuggets I'd love to share that really were me getting out of the burnt ashes of what was.
His name's Craig Stanland, Stanland. CraigStanland.com. Go there. He's got a book out called Blank Canvas. Go to Amazon, buy it. You know what I love, Craig, when I do this work that I get to do, and is I like when people say things that appear in the genius path, okay? You've given some pieces that are inside of the genius path, and I love when people give them, because it creates relevance and it creates a grounding and anchoring for me and for our audience, because we call what you experienced crucible moments, where that you're inside of the crucible and it's spinning, and the centrifuge is doing its work on you, whether it's that or whether it's this heating process that's boiling up and taking the dross out. And I'm a little tingly now because that's powerful to me. And then the other thing we talk about is raw data, and raw data for us, Craig, is exactly what you said. Our material that has and bears our fingerprints. And I like the fact that you bring that into such a delightful awareness. Now, here's the next piece that we talk about, Craig, and that is, we believe that inside of the raw data, and as a result of the crucible and the spinning centrifuge, and as a result of you claiming that and taking hard ganders at that work, the genius starts to emerge, And because I believe that each and every person is given a gift intrinsically of genius. And so, Craig, I wonder, as you work in your reinvention work, what is kind of give us, if you could, again, just some high treetop moments of what do you do to help a person come to the place where that they find what we call swoosh, which are those aha moments that ignite this thing inside of that person that lets them know something different is possible for them going forward. Walk our audience through a little bit of just some real big ideas of how you do that, sir.
I love that, because that's actually one of the most rewarding things about the work that I do are those aha moments, those connecting the dots when I'm on the phone with a client, and through the phone, you can hear the weight coming off of their shoulders.
Sure.
You can see the puzzle pieces coming together for them, and just them saying, "Oh my God, I get it." And one thing that I love working on with my clients, and I love working on it because it was so important for me, is self-trust. The power of self-trust. So when I made the choice to commit the crime that landed me in prison, I knew what I was doing was wrong.
Wow.
My heart spoke up, and it said, mine was it was a fraud. So I used my laptop. So it was a series of clicking the enter button, clicking the mouse button. And every time I did that, my fraud went on for just under a year. So I'm guessing there were a minimum of 1,000 choices that were made to perpetuate this fraud. Every single one of them, my heart spoke and said, do not do this. This is not the way. This is not for you. Do not do this. I ignored it every single time. Now, I'll ask you, let's say you have, a friend who you ignore 1,000 times. That friend's going to eventually stop talking to you. My voice, I now know it didn't disappear, but to me at the time, I thought it had completely vanished. I thought it was gone. It was gone to the point that trying to think about what to eat for dinner was a difficult choice and a decision to make. I didn't trust myself. What workout was I going to do in the prison gym became an issue. What was I going to write about? All these minuscule decisions and choices were so difficult because I did not trust myself. And I started through journaling, really understanding that and understanding how important self-trust is. Because when you trust yourself, you believe in yourself and you have that confidence in yourself. I didn't have any of that. So it was by pure chance that somebody put up on, I discovered this when I was in the halfway house. So I was out of prison, but I was living in the halfway house. Somebody put up on Twitter, the surest path to self-confidence I know is making and keeping commitments to yourself. And that clicked for me. That really clicked. And I said, I've got to jump all over this. This is I want something deeper than confidence. You can't have confidence if you don't believe in yourself. You can't believe in yourself if you don't have trust. And I knew I wanted that voice back, and I knew that voice was trust. So I started by making and keeping those commitments. And what I did was actually pick maybe one of the biggest things I could, in a sense. When I was in prison, I realized I made fear-based choices that landed me in prison. So my intuition told me to write down all of my fears and to execute them one by one. My number one fear was public speaking. So when I was in prison, I made the goal to conquer my fear of public speaking. And the biggest stage I could think of was the TED stage. So sitting in prison, not much hope, not much anything, but I said, that's how I'm going to do it. After I read that tweet and I connected it to my fear, I made and kept commitments all the way to the TED stage. And it was just such an amazing journey. And this is the work that I do with my clients now. This is stuff I do with my friends, because I think having that foundation is so critically important, to have that self-trust and to start small, making small commitments so that they're not overwhelming. But you start stacking up a bunch of small ones, one after another. Sawdust makes a pile. And next thing you know, you become a person who takes action. You can trust yourself. And I really think that anything is possible when you trust yourself.
It's a remarkable thing you're doing. Craig, just a couple of minutes left. It's your moment, spotlight's on you. The people listening to you right now, dude. The people listening. Go inside your soul and talk to them. Say what you need to say to them.
Your past cannot define you. without your consent. Any labels that somebody wants to apply to you, those are their labels. It's not who you are. You get to decide that. There is no one else that gets to decide who you are and what it is that you can create. Nobody can do that except for you. And that means that we can allow them in or we can keep them out. And I believe that that is just such an empowering, liberating place to live from. It's very easy for me I could have fallen into that trap of I am a convicted felon and I'm going to be that for the rest of my life. And the fact is, I will have that title for the remainder of my life. And I accept that. Anybody wants to judge me for that? I know that that is actually their own self-hate projected outwards. Because whenever we judge anyone, that is our own self-hate projected outwards. And it's an opportunity. I now know when I judge someone, it's an opportunity to look within. What edge is this person bumping into on me? And I think that's just something so important when we're in those really dark places, when we're at the bottom, when we're trying to reconcile and reinvent, to know that whatever happened, it can't define us without our consent.
His name is Craig Stanland, Stanland, CraigStanland.com. Go there. He's got a book out called Blank Canvas, and go and buy that. Spend a few dollars on this gentleman. And if you so desire, I believe he takes private clients. I don't know his business, but that's up to you if you want to find out about that. But I just have to say, Craig, it's been an honor to have you here. I hope you'll come back. And my prayer is that all your dreams continue to come true, because you are an amazing person, and your gift is evident. Well, I'm just glad we got to spend another session together. Those of you that love our show and love our programs, you know what we do here. We're in the business of one thing, and that is bringing genius into the universe. We believe it's the era, that's the age of enlightenment. We believe that personal renaissance is awakening again. And we believe there's a path, a process and a path. And we call it the Genius Path. If you want to find out about us, go to thegeniuspath.com, thegeniuspath.com. Till that day comes, I remind you that I'm Steve Bonenberger. And this is the Genius Path. Travel far.